I'm here tonight to declare that Joe Biden's border bloodbath ends the day I take the oath of office.
Trump on the trail. Former President Donald Trump rallied voters in Wisconsin last night as he looks to make gains in the battleground state that President Biden won narrowly in 2020. More on that later, but first, fallout from the Israeli strike that killed humanitarian workers in Gaza. A top White House spokesperson said the Biden administration was outraged to learn of the strike. Criticism is mounting. Here to discuss this and more is Julia Manchester, national politics reporter for The Hill. Julia, good morning.
Good morning, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's start with that fallout from that Israeli strike that killed 7 aid workers with the charity group World Central Kitchen, which is run by chef Jose Andres. There were already concerns about humanitarian deaths throughout the conflict. It's now increasing. We're obviously in an election year, so let's look at this from the perspective of the campaign trail. Israel's war against Hamas has been one of the biggest vulnerabilities for President Biden heading into November. How's he going to have to message going forward to not alienate progressives, sounding the alarm about humanitarian deaths, while also staying supportive of the U.S. ally Israel?
Well, look, this is a very complicated situation for President Biden because we know that he's getting quite a lot of pushback at home, particularly among the Arab American and Muslim American community who are unhappy with his handling of this war. But at the same time, though, we're seeing tensions between him and Benjamin Netanyahu, who is facing his own political issues at home. Those tensions are continuing to mount. So this is a huge headache for President Biden. It puts him in a very difficult position because we've seen that he's taken this very pro-Israel stance, but you see these, the targeting or, what seems to be to many people, the targeting of aid workers, of, civilians by Israel in Gaza. And that's just not a good look for the Biden administration, who has been supporting Israel. I think this particular incident with, the World Central Kitchen workers being killed, that adds a whole other layer onto this because, look, we know that Jose Andres is a big name. He's a big name in political circles, and he's a celebrity chef. So the World Central Kitchen is very well known, and it's also obviously a horrible look when you have aid workers who are killed in these situations. So it adds more spotlight to this, and that's something that the Biden administration really does not need right now. So they're in a difficult spot. It puts them in an electoral bind at a time when they have other issues electorally, like the possibility of a third party candidacy from Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yeah, Julia, let's stay on this topic for a second. There's a new story on thehill.com today about Democratic fears that the Israeli-Hamas war could cost Democrats wins in November, both the main card, the presidential, but also some down-ballot races. One House Democrat told The Hill that, quote, the sooner Biden can break from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a major way, then the better off he will be politically. Now, of course, this comes after Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer called for new elections in Israel last month. Is this the smartest move for Biden at this point to distance himself from Bibi Netanyahu?
Yeah, I think it is smart. And I think you saw with Chuck Schumer, the highest ranking Jewish American in the country calling for Israelis to hold elections to essentially oust Netanyahu. That could provide President Biden with a gateway to criticize Benjamin Netanyahu. And we know that right now personal relations between Netanyahu and Biden are not great. The issue, though, is that Biden has already tied himself to Israel and Netanyahu, in the days after October 7th, 2023. And obviously, the war was at a completely different stage at that point. You have that image of Netanyahu and Biden hugging, and you see progressive activists and Biden critics playing that, showing that image over and over and over again. So I think it's smart for Biden to distance himself, particularly as we see the death toll of civilians continuing to rapidly climb, but also with this very high profile killing of aid workers in Gaza at the World Central Kitchen. So right now, I think that's probably the smartest move because it allows Biden to maybe say, look, I'm still pro-Israel, but like, a large number of Israelis, I'm not happy with Benjamin Netanyahu's handling of this.
Yeah, definitely a possibility in the days and weeks to come. Julie, I want to shift gears now to Trump news. First, we'll hit the campaign trail. Then we'll go to the legal beat. He rallied in Wisconsin last night, which is, of course, a crucial swing state this cycle. What was his message there? And talk about how important Wisconsin is when you talk about strategy for come November.
Yeah, Wisconsin is incredibly important because it is one of the main swing states. It's part of it's one of the blue wall states that Trump flipped in 2016, but then lost to Biden in 2020. So Trump obviously trying to win it back. It has a big agricultural community, obviously a big blue collar constituency that Biden and Trump have both worked to appeal to. But, I thought it was notable. I believe it was at the rally in Wisconsin. President Trump was asked about what he thought about the Florida abortion measure being on the ballot, and he dodged it in such a major way, saying, "Oh, I'll have a statement on that next week." So really putting that off. But in a state like Wisconsin, I bring up the Florida aspect because we know that there are lots of suburban voters and lots of swing voters in Wisconsin who may be looking to what these candidates say about abortion. And we know that President Trump has been very careful about how he approaches this issue, particularly in swing states. So Wisconsin, very important to the Trump campaign. We can expect him and Biden to, be visiting that state in the coming weeks and months ahead.
Yeah, Julia, let's zero in on this topic of abortion and reproductive rights in the grand scheme of electoral politics. There was those twin rulings in Florida earlier this week, one that paved the way for the 15-week abortion ban, another one that paves the way for that ballot measure that would protect abortion rights if it's accepted in November. Top Democrat, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, was in Florida yesterday and said that Florida is going to be the key battleground, the key location for the abortion fight come November. How good are these conditions right now for Democrats as we look ahead to November? Because we remember back in 2022, it was the Dobbs decision that sort of propelled Democrats to those better than expected victories come November. It seems like the political landscape right now is trending in that direction. Should Democrats be excited about how things look right now?
Yeah, it was also in 2022 that you saw a red wave in Florida, and Florida really solidified itself as a red state. Look, this is what I kind of predict or foresee happening in Florida. And look, I don't want to underscore or underplay how big of a deal this is for Democrats and abortion rights activists. This is definitely going to drive turnout. And in the suburbs of cities like Orlando and Miami, there are going to be voters who are going to be making decisions on this and thinking about this when they go to the ballot box. At the same time, though, I think what we will see, and polling shows that 60% of Florida voters agree that abortion rights should be enshrined in the state's constitution. So we can predict maybe that 60% of voters, the threshold needed to essentially put this in the state constitution, that will pass. However, the big question I have is, how does this affect Biden? How does this affect Trump and Rick Scott, the senator from Florida? We've already seen Democrats say Florida is in play. It's once again a quintessential battleground state. But I have to say, talking to a number of Republicans, they say, look, we expect the ballot measure could very well pass, but there's ticket splitters in Florida. So someone could vote for Trump and Rick Scott and then, vote to enshrine abortion in the state's constitution. So we'll see if those ticket splitters, are actually a big deal. We know that Democrats certainly have their eye on the state. They want to be spending money. But at the end of the day, though, even if Republicans are safe in Florida, it gives Republicans a bit of a headache because it forces them to spend more money than they initially planned to in Florida. Similar to how Larry Hogan running for senator in Maryland forces Democrats to spend more money. So it shuffles up their resources, which can be annoying, I think, when you're looking at a battleground map.
Yeah, Julia, let's get in one more abortion question here. On the other side of the coin is former President Trump, as you mentioned, is teasing this major announcement on reproductive rights and abortion rights for next week. What's he expected to say? And I mean, this issue has been so tough and difficult for Republicans in the wake of the Dobbs decision, especially Trump. How is he expected to sort of wade into this debate?
Well, it makes it even more difficult for Trump because now his home state is Florida, and his former opponent, Governor Ron DeSantis, signed that 6-week abortion ban into law in Florida, which kind of forced Trump on the campaign trail to respond to all of this. We've seen Trump sort of, rumblings of Trump flirting with a 15-week restriction, kind of veering away from the language of ban, though we know that Democrats will certainly use that to characterize whatever this announcement is. We've also seen Republicans like Nikki Haley say, look, I am they're pro-life. However, they don't believe that this will be solved at a federal level, that they need to leave this up to states. That sort of gives them political cover. So Trump has said the state argument in the past, but this is something he has to address, because this is something that Democrats are winning up and down the ballot on. Republicans haven't figured out the messaging on it. And I would argue that, in 2022, if it weren't for Roe versus Wade being overturned and, maybe some of the Republican candidates that were at the top of the ballot in some of these battleground states, you would have seen Republicans perform much better. So, on the issues of crime and the economy, the problem was they didn't have their messaging on abortion, ready. Essentially, it wasn't good enough. So I think this is Trump trying to maybe set an example for the rest of the ticket for the Republican ticket going into November.
Perhaps it'll be interesting to see how he approaches this, because it's been so prickly for Republicans, so definitely something to watch. I want to ask you about another thing Trump recently said, this time in Michigan on Tuesday. He once again used that term bloodbath, which he was highly criticized for using last month. This time he used the term to chide Biden on the border, coining the phrase, quote, Joe Biden's border bloodbath. He took a lot of heat for using that term last month. Why is he bringing it back now? Is it helpful for his electoral pursuits? Is his team unhappy that he continues to wade into these controversial areas in terms of his rhetoric? I mean, what's the strategy here?
I would say Donald Trump, and talking to Republican strategists who, are in Trump world, they say this too. Donald Trump knows exactly what he's doing when he uses a term like bloodbath. He wants people to be talking about it. And what are we doing here, Michael? You and I are talking about this. He wants his name out there, to generate buzz and such. Now, this works for his base. Absolutely. They, they feed into and they, sort of agree with everything he says in terms of that language, and it energizes them. The question, though, is how does this impact independent swing voters? I would argue that, this language saying bloodbath, maybe it might rub some voters the wrong way. But at the end of the day, these voters are voting on issues. If Trump continues to use this language and incorporate it into policy, rhetoric, et cetera, maybe it becomes an issue. But I think right now, this is him trying to generate buzz.
All right, Julia, finally, last question. Let's take a look at Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. There's new reporting at the Hill today about his icy relationship with Trump since January 6th and since Trump left the White House. McConnell also says he's going to serve out his full term through 2026, but we know he's stepping down as GOP leader at the end of this year. Now, if Trump wins in November, what's it going to be like having Trump and McConnell both working in Washington again, considering this extremely icy relationship and how they left things back when Trump left the White House?
Well, it's going to be difficult because you have a class of Republicans under McConnell, whether it's John Barrasso or John Thune, Joni Ernst, these younger Republicans who are really moving it. They're the next generation of leadership for Republicans in the Senate. They don't necessarily want to have an icy relationship with Trump either. And I think McConnell understands that, because right now, Trump is the Republican brand. If you're running as a Republican, you're going to be tied to Trump, whether you like it or not. So I think Mitch McConnell is, love him or hate him, he's one of the most tactful politicians this country has ever seen. I think he will probably work to provide cover to those members while understanding that, Trump is someone he needs to ultimately work with. Now that he's on his way out, probably the stakes aren't as high for him. But I think a lot of it depends on whether the Republicans are in a minority or a majority. I mean, there could be the situation that Trump is president and Senate Republicans are in the minority in the Senate. So that could create more of a headache, but certainly an interesting dynamic and a feud that has not let up since January 6th.
To say the least with that. Julia Manchester, national politics reporter for The Hill, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
The strongest earthquake in 25 years rocked Taiwan, killing at least 9 people and injuring hundreds. The powerful 7.4 magnitude quake hit the island's east coast, causing landslides and severely damaging at least 100 buildings. Local officials are currently assessing the full extent of the damage, while rescuers have freed dozens of people trapped in highway tunnels. Iran is vowing vengeance after they say Israel bombed their embassy in Syria on Monday. According to the Iran Foreign Ministry, that attack killed at least 7 people in the embassy, including the head of Iran's covert military operations and 2 other senior generals. The Pentagon says their assessment is that Israel was behind the attack. Tensions between Israel and Iran have taken a turn for the worse since the October 7th attack in Israel. That attack was carried out by the Iranian-backed Hamas militia. And former President Trump's social media company is going after its 2 co-founders, alleging, quote, reckless and wasteful decisions. A lawsuit filed this week from Trump Media and Technology Group accuses the 2 of failing spectacularly to set up a corporate leadership structure and nearly derailing its plans to merge with a publicly traded firm. The company, which went public recently, has had a rocky start, with shares falling over 20% from its peak after reporting a loss of $58 million in 2023. Trump, who owns a majority stake of the company, has seen his net worth plunge by $1 billion as the stock price swings wildly. And Taylor Swift has officially joined Forbes' Billionaire list. Swift crossed the $1 billion threshold last October after her record-breaking Eras tour. Forbes is estimating that she's sitting on $500 million in cash from music royalties and touring, plus an additional $500 million from the increasing value of her music catalog. Swift is the first musician to become a billionaire solely based on her songs and touring. And that's it for today's Daily Debrief. I'm Mychael Schnell. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel, and come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.